Welcome to Technology for Humans, tech through the eyes of its leaders. Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm joined today with Freedom Dumlao, who is the Treasurer and Committee Member of Ruby Central and also the CTO of Vestmark. Freedom, welcome to the podcast.
Errol, thanks so much. I'm glad to be here. It's great to talk to you.
I think there's probably a lot that we want to get around today. Probably the most pressing subject and the one that I think most of our listeners are going to be interested in is some of the, I don't want to say controversy because that probably gives it a little bit too much air, but there's been a lot of discussion recently around some of the actions of Ruby Central. There was a depending, of course, on when you're listening to this, there was a press release or an article written yesterday by Ali, who was the COO, the operations manager of Ruby Central yesterday, which I think covered everything that we need to cover. But can you tell us what Ruby Central did? And we'll get into why it got confusing. So let's just start there.
Sure.
What happened with Ruby Gems? Yeah.
Yeah. I'll start off with saying I am not a spokesperson for the organization at all, and I am unqualified to be one. But I can at least talk about what I know as a board member sitting in the treasurer's seat, and which means I don't have, I don't know. I can't. When you say the question, what Ruby Central did,
let's also say
what I voted for.
Yeah. And if there's any question, just refer to what's in writing from Ali.
Yeah.
Because that is the actual statement, right? Right. Okay.
That's right.
Right.
That is correct.
Go ahead,
that is, and she's got access to more information than I do, right? Like my role as treasurer and board member means that I get access to information, through the people that I am on the board with, and then we talk about those things, and then we come to a vote. So essentially, what happened at Ruby Central is that we recognized on our own, and then also with the encouragement of companies that depend on Ruby Gems, that there's a lot of gap in the oversight and management of the security of the infrastructure that runs Ruby Central, Ruby Gems, and it was important to us that get addressed. For us, we wanted to do that in a way that worked well with the community, and we did try to engage with folks. I think if you look, we started talking about a new governance model as far back as there's probably a blog post from last year when Ruby Central started talking about this. The challenge that we were dealing with on the board is that the pressure really heated up because we had our own little attack on Ruby Gems, which was amusing but also a bit scary, where a malicious actor had created a bunch of gems that were designed to steal information. The motives of that person was that they wanted to, I think they were targeting spam or scam email people. So they had maybe a noble motive, but in general, we don't want Ruby Gems to be used as an attack vector for anyone, whether they are a scam artist or not. Find another way to attack them. So we saw that. We saw what happened in the NPM, which was just so much more potent than what we could have imagined would be possible. And it wasn't just us. We were not alone in seeing that and thinking wow, that's really challenging. Companies that depend on Ruby Gems started having their auditors and their risk team start looking at them and say hey, do you guys use NPM? And they say yes. And they say, okay, well, are you guys okay and safe from this attack? And they say, mitigated, we're fine. And then they say, well, what else are you using that's like NPM? And what else in your stack looks like that? And then they have to say, it's Ruby Gems and it's PyPy and it's all of the other package managers, it's Homebrew, it's all of the other ways in which they deal with
everything.
Package managers. Yeah, and the challenge for companies that have to deal with doing these regular risk assessments, and every country has a different bar for what's compliant and what isn't. But in general, the ask is always the same. How do you ensure that what I depend on is safe, and that my customers who use the software that I'm using, that I'm getting from you, how do I ensure them that they're safe? And that led Ruby Central to kind of to take a look. Even we had already looked at that and said, like, oh yeah, we could do some things better. And we'd even told some companies that we work with that we had a plan in place and we were working towards improving that. But it suddenly became a big issue very fast. With that all happening all very rapidly, we needed to find some way to ensure that things were secure. And we did try to work with some of the folks who were certainly upset. And I, as a software developer and open source contributor myself, I certainly understand where people who were upset were coming from. But it really was a matter of trying to ensure there was some accountability that we could show to companies that depended on Ruby Gems, so that they could continue to use Ruby Gems and tell their risk teams, like, yeah, the thing I depend on is safe and well managed. They have a process in place. So what we ultimately decided the right move to do was figure out what the critical pieces of infrastructure were, which was very difficult to do. While we were doing that, we wanted to just kind of freeze everything so that once we start looking at this, there's no like changes going in and nothing weird happening. Have that just be a temporary freeze, and then go to the people who we work with, who either contribute code to the critical packages that become part of Ruby Gems and Bundler, and also people who have access to the infrastructure that operates it, because that we do have at Ruby Central. I don't get paid, and nobody on the board does, but Ruby Central does have a small paid team of people, and those people, along with some volunteers, have access to, or have had access to, the actual infrastructure that runs the stuff, right? So what we decided was, we'll go to those people and we'll say, if you have access to the infrastructure, you're an operator, and we just want to get an operator agreement in place with you that says, hey, I promise not to do bad stuff. And if you have access to commit code, we want to get a contributor agreement in place. So these are not uncommon things. If you look at other organizations like Ruby Gems, you'll see very similar things in place.
Standard.
That's the way to go. So we in our minds, it was not the way we wanted to do it, and we were like, boy, I hope we can get to folks before and talk to them before they like get the wrong idea. And we didn't. We just totally did.
Right.
We completely failed to be able to get the communication we wanted. We made the changes, and we were like, okay, we at least know now we're safe, and we can tell the companies that depend on us, we've taken the first step to getting ourselves into a place where you can tell your risk assessment team that we're safe. And then we went to bed, and then we woke up, and we were like, crap. We have utterly and completely failed to communicate clearly what we were trying to do. And
you would not have imagined that, though, would you?
I personally wouldn't have. I would say there are some folks who are at Ruby Central who were like, yep, that's exactly what I would have expected. And so I was like, well, I wish I had that insight before we cast our vote, because I would have liked to have included that at least in the conversation. Now, genuinely speaking, I don't know if that necessarily means I would have voted differently personally, because my company wasn't a voice in that room, except for the fact that I was in the room. And so, but when I work with Ruby Central, I take off my CTO hat and I put on my boring treasurer board member hat. But when I leave that and I come back here where I'm sitting now at work, like I'm subject to U.S. regulations in a very intense way. My company is financial services technology, and so we are constantly, under the scrutiny of both our clients and
highly
regulators, and so
and insurers and clients and
correct, yeah. And so it was important to me that we had this figured out, and it all starts with taking a first step. Now, I think if Ruby Central had the opportunity to do this exact same thing again, it would have been handled totally differently. We would have said, "Hey, who here knows how to talk to the public?" Because in truth, really none of us do. I think Shan, the new executive director that we hired, is brilliant and like can speak with a great voice. She's slightly less technical than many of the other folks on the board. The board members are all software engineers. Like we're software engineers first, and then we do this other thing.
For the betterment of the community.
Yeah, but some of us do, self-included, suffer from the old software engineer trope of being a little awkward in our communications and maybe not having the best judgment about how to not be emotional in our communications, and so we definitely would have approached communication way differently if we had the chance. I think that's
yes,
there's
in
no
hindsight.
doubt about it. Yeah. I think and. You don't really get second chances at this kind of thing, but like I'll tell you personally, I felt terrible because I knew we in principle had done the right thing. There's no doubt in my mind that we'd done what was needed. We took the first step to do what was needed, and we've since been taking more steps. And I think we talked a bit about that in the statement that was published. And we're getting closer to the actual goal now. But what made me feel sick is that I saw the fear that people in the community were expressing, and these are people who I'm friends with, right? Like I go to Ruby events. I go to karaoke with some of the people who were afraid. I get beers and midnight pizzas with some of the people who were afraid, right? And so I was just like, oh crap! Like the last thing I want to do is to have my friends be in a position where they feel afraid that like there's some big evil shift happening in our community. And so I'm feeling bad about it right now. Like I'm really sorry for causing people this sort of fear and concern and making it so that people had to wake up and worry about whether or not Ruby's future was now in question. That was never the case. But how would you know? Because our communication it fell short.
Right. And I think part of the problem, Freedom, is that some of those dissenting voices were louder than what we heard from the committee. So some of those rumors and strange explanations just ran away with it and literally stole the story.
That's right. And some of them were very, very exciting sounding too, which makes it all the more likely that people will share and perpetuate those. And while you've got dozens of those voices sort of shouting in, Ruby Central may be a lot smaller than people think it is. It is the board is 8 volunteer board members, and all of us are software engineers. So when we're trying to figure out, okay, what should Ruby Central say back, right? Like we're reading the same stuff that everyone else is, and we're like, oh my gosh, that's not it. Like, and also, to be really clear, Errol, like some of what we're hearing were from people that we genuinely consider friends and wanted to be. We wanted to continue to maintain the relationship, at least as far as I know. I'll admit, I actually don't know a lot of those folks. Personally, and I don't know the maintainers personally very well, and I wasn't a part of the direct communications with them, but I know we wanted to work with them, and we did not plan to cut them out the way that they felt they were cut out. But so you've got dozens of voices coming in, and then you've got 8 people who jump on a Slack, and this is people, you've got people in Africa and Turkey and on the west coast of the US, on the east coast of the US, and like we're all trying to like get together and figure out how do we patch together a response so that we can say, no, this is what we were trying to do. Meanwhile, by the way, every friend of ours is chiming in saying, what are you going to say? How are you going to say it? What did you do? And maybe you should say this. And so all of that noise is coming in. And then you've got the biggest problem of all. And any software engineer who's been in the position where you sit in a room and you try to work together on one document and get everyone to agree that document has all the right elements. Like it just, we were not getting there. Like we were having a hard time because like, oh, we should say this. Oh, we should say that. So we're adding stuff and they're saying, oh, we're putting too much in here. And that's just like, and so those discussions were ongoing. And I was also getting direct reach outs from friends, people who are in the community who are like, can you just
what's
help
going
us
on
to understand? And so I foolishly believed that I could at least say, hey, I don't know everything because I clearly don't. But like from the seat I was sitting the day when we made the vote, this was my perception. And I tried to write it up as quickly as I could. And then I went through another pass and I didn't use any AI, which is a huge change from normally when I'm writing stuff these days, I'm like, okay, AI, take a look at this for me.
Yeah, get the polish done.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not doing that. Like, I want people to know this is like genuine. And for me, I definitely didn't use the right words across the board on everything there. But, I just wanted people to understand, like, these are flawed humans that are trying to do the right thing right now. And we are working on it. And we are committed to the community, all of us, especially me. And that's what I wanted people to take away with it. And I think instead, I think I potentially inspired a new conspiracy theory, and I was like, and I was like, okay. And then I'm in this trap, right? Because I wanted to fix it. I'm like, okay, let me go edit my blog post, and then I was like, internet trap number one. You edit the record, and everyone's gonna come and say, oh, he changed it. So I was like, all right, well, I can't. So I was like, I'm just gonna leave the record as it is. And I'll just talk to people because here's the reality is, it's not going to be long until me and this community will be together again in the same place at the same time where we'll get to talk and people will, I'm sure, ask me questions and I'll be able to talk with them in that context as well, which to me I think is where Ruby shines the brightest. For anybody, by the way, for anyone who's listening, who has not been to an in-person Ruby event, you've got to go. It is completely different than what the experience is like online.
I would agree completely. And despite everything that we've just discussed, our community is still the very best. Like the hands down. There's no question about that. There is obviously room in any community for opinion and viewpoints to exist. I think Ali said it well. There isn't room for wild stories. Like there is a difference between saying, here's my opinion on this subject and presenting something as a fact that is actually an opinion. Here is what happened.
And there has been some of that, sadly. And it's we're getting some advice from people who have some experience in how to talk to the public, and that's helping. But we still don't have it figured out yet. And I think, though, we have done a pretty good job of not making things worse by going and trying to respond directly to every single thing that pops up. I don't know if that's the right move.
I think it is. I mean, I'm obviously no expert in this field either, but we all have to communicate from our jobs. We all have these roles, and it's tough. I've thought about it. I've also thought there are some positives here. One of them, which I think is incredibly important, is around that fact of security. We rely on gems every day. Like there is billions of dollars and people relying on these things. There's healthcare applications and finance applications and the world over relying on this infrastructure. And it might not have been it's brought some awareness around the fact of how much we rely on this at no cost.
Yeah.
It's a service that we make use of every day. Now, there's a lot of people contribute to that. Like at Reinteractive, we contribute to the mail gem. Our founder wrote that gem. So, yeah.
That's great.
And I understand a little bit about what it takes to keep these things updated. But, there's something I didn't understand. And that is, when we audit an application, you look at, are the gems up to date? Are they the official published version rather than a forked version? Like these are things that we look at. What I didn't consider was, what if the official published version that is up to date and patched has an attack vector? Like,
That's right.
something that was placed in there. I didn't consider that would be possible. So that, I think, is something that developers should take away and understand. Like, that's something to think about. Here's another thing, and I would like you to talk about this. The committee is, as you said, mostly unpaid volunteers. There is some paid staff, but it relies completely and wholly on sponsorship dollars coming in for all of this infrastructure that we rely on. Now, the first point that I want to make out of that is, what is the influence that a sponsor has on the committee and on some of these decisions? Can you answer that?
Yeah, I mean, our policy is that we are always open to getting suggestions from sponsors, but we will not make a decision because a sponsor has told us to do something. And sponsors have attempted to coerce us into doing things by specifically saying, like, if you don't, then I am going to walk away. And I do think, and by the way, like, one of the things I wish I could have phrased differently in my personal blog post was, I think I gave people the impression that that's what the pressure we were under was. And that is not what I intended to communicate, but it is how it reads. And I apologize for that. But we don't, and will not just do something because a sponsor tells us to. It's not in the community's best interest to operate that way. And we have given up in recent terms. And while Ruby Central isn't making any particular statements about this, there is some existing content out there about a sponsor who pulled out and pulled out a very large sum of money that was already budgeted for in recent terms, because they wanted to dictate the content of RailsConf. They wanted to specifically say, like, who could or couldn't be on stage. And we know that these kinds of decisions can be very complicated for the community to parse. They're complicated for me to parse, because it's like, gosh, what's the right thing to do here? But in principle, as soon as we say sponsors get to decide what we do and how we do it, then we're really just agents of the sponsor instead of agents of the community. So for us, in principle, I think one of the things that so Shan has actually, we've talked about this quite a lot at the board. Shan is the paid executive director. I should mention that all of the folks who are working at Ruby Central that actually do receive a paycheck are people who could make a lot more money if they weren't working for a nonprofit. That's for sure. And I think I would put Shan amongst them. But I think it's going to be important for Ruby Central to clarify those stances in writing for people to see and read, if we don't already have that clear, so that it's not a question. Our values are genuinely targeting how do we maintain the best, most stable, secure, safe infrastructure for the Ruby community. Like, it's all Ruby. There's no real agendas there. It's just that.
Right.
And
right.
That's what we really would like to be, for people to understand. But yeah, we have walked away from money because of sponsors.
Right, but you've done that with your integrity intact.
Correct.
Yeah. That's an interesting point, and I don't think a lot of people actually know that.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things, because do you go and brag and say, "Hey, of course not. we held the line and gave up money"? Well, it doesn't feel, to be honest, Errol, it doesn't feel great, because we still have to figure out how to make up the missing part of the budget now when that happens. And this is where being the treasurer gets kind of crappy, because now I'm looking at those numbers and trying to figure it out. But we do have a good a couple of people that help us out with finance that are incredible. And if it wasn't for them, it'd be much more difficult. So,
yeah. The other thing I think it points to, like I said, the committee is mostly volunteers. We rely on the work that you do, not just for the conferences, but obviously all of that infrastructure around it. It is incumbent on all of us to have some, I want to say input, but that makes it sound like everyone should be just shouting their opinions. That's not what I mean. Input as in, what do we do about it? If you're listening to this podcast, for example, if you're listening to this podcast and you're an owner, a CEO, a CTO, and you find yourself relying on Ruby Gems, then consider a sponsorship. Consider how you might want to help.
Errol, I owe you a beer after that. That's great. You took the words right out of my mouth. I genuinely, I do think if you're in the position to be able to pay part of your usage of Ruby Gems, it really does. It really is, I would say, part of your responsibility as a member of this community to find a way to contribute back. Now, I know that not every Ruby Gems consumer, business or otherwise, is necessarily in a position to make a contribution, but I think there are quite a lot of organizations that benefit greatly from the work of Ruby Central, and we would love to talk about ways in which you can help to sponsor. And there are numerous ways. It's not always financial. Sometimes there are other ways that you can sponsor and help Ruby Central out.
Yes. It's not just financial. Like there's many different ways. We were talking before about, about the different ways that people might contribute, and putting on conferences, massive amount of work. I can't even imagine how this is done. Like, how do you put on a conference? How do you consider all of the things that are needed? But there is work that's needed from individuals, obviously, delivering sessions that are well thought and what people want to see. But, there's all sorts of other things around that, all you have to do is put up your hand and say, I'd like to help.
Yeah, that's right. And especially like as we're closing in on announcements about RubyConf next year, there's definitely going to be volunteer opportunities for folks who are interested. And there's a lot of ways that you can help out there. I think Ruby Central has a really great program for mentoring new people. I think it's the Scholars Program. I think if you've got time and energy to devote to that, that could be useful. There's just so many ways to support and give back. For me, mine is I've got just enough free time that I can give what I've got here. I did not expect when I volunteered for this role that I would also be volunteering as treasurer. That part I regret because it's incredibly boring. But it's all right.
Someone's got to do it. Someone has to do it.
Somebody has to do it for sure. But hopefully I won't have to always be the one doing it. We'll see.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yes, definitely help out. It reminds me of a recent story. Someone, rather stupidly, probably on X, wrote about something they didn't like about Rails. Here's something that needs to be fixed. And, of course, DHH, who was very, prolific, I think is the word, on X, wrote back and said, I must have missed your PR.
It's such a great point, and obviously that's a great nerd snipe, by the way, right there. Like the I miss your PR, like that's just fits really well within the community. But it's true. Like that kind of thing is something that's said inside engineering teams at companies too, right? Like it's you'll see that sometimes. You'll see somebody's comment on your PR, and you'll say like, "Wow, they've spent more time writing their comment than it would have taken to just submit their own PR to fix the thing." And but I think it can be sometimes in people's nature. Sometimes the act of complaining or the act of highlighting an issue feels in and of itself rewarding. I think many people fall into that trap. And the act of fixing an issue sometimes gets very little attention at all. Like the prize for being the one who fixes it can oftentimes feel a lot smaller than the prize for being the one who complains the loudest. So
right. Yeah.
I think if we could improve things in the community, maybe we can do a better job of celebrating those of us who've only contributed something small here or there. Like every little bit deserves some celebration. So I think that's probably
which is one of the exciting things about going to a conference is you hear sessions from people who contributed in ways that you would just never know about unless you saw that session, you saw them speak, and the work that went into arriving at that conclusion.
That's right. Well, or you get a chance to meet some people who you've only ever you'll meet somebody or even see them on stage, and all you know is their GitHub handle, right? Like you've never actually interacted with them, but like I'll give you a great one. So one of our principal engineers here, just when I was heading out to Rails World, he's like, if you see Eileen, let her know that she has a massive amount of thanks from us, because it's because of her work on multi-databases that we're able to do this big migration project. So one of the things we're doing where I work right now is we're migrating a bunch of stuff from a bunch of stuff to a single Rails monolith, which is the second time I've done this. And in the process of doing it, we're taking advantage of multi-database to make it work a little bit easier for us. And so he was like, hey, if you bump into Eileen, just say. So I got a chance to do that. Like I think it was me and Rhiannon and Eileen were just standing around having coffee between sessions. And I just said, hey, Eileen, I got to tell you, my team wants me to tell you thanks so much. Like we're getting so much done because of what you did. I don't know how else she would ever have heard that. And she seemed, Eileen's she's very much a badass. And she was like, oh, welcome. But, it was great to have a place to give, to like actually share that gratitude directly with a person who's made an impact at our company and never worked here.
The flip side of that, how great it is when someone comes up to you at a conference and says, oh, I heard you solved problem X, Y. How did you do that?
Yes.
And you can talk and feel like the expert and feel, you
you get this. You just got to bring your soapbox with you so you can stand on it for a little while and talk about,
Yeah, absolutely.
True.
Yeah. Yes. So just putting that matter to bed for the moment,
Sure.
Let's not take up any of the rumors or the stories. I think they will play out in the normal forums. There is an official statement. Read that and just know that the people at Ruby Central are trying to do good. Start with that viewpoint and then proceed from there.
I think that is a great next step from here. Thanks, Errol, by the way, for that. I appreciate you saying that. It means a lot. I would say there's been a lot of sad feelings at Ruby Central trying to figure out how to do this better.
You don't deserve that. You definitely don't deserve that. Let's change the subject.
Sure.
Let's change the subject. Something that I think is of great importance is the future of Ruby and encouraging new developers. This is something that I am highly interested in. There are some agencies that have trainee programs. CodeMiner is one that does that and does it well. What do you have ideas about this, or do you have a view on how we should solve this problem? Or are solving the problem, I should say.
Yeah, my view. So so this is a problem I'm personally working on. I didn't realize it was a mission for me until it became one. For those who don't know a little bit of my backstory, so at my previous company, it was a company called FlexCar. We rewrote a massive fleet of Java microservices into a single Rails monolith. And we did it in 4 months, and it has turned out great. And FlexCar is still on Rails, even after I left and took my hands off of it. And still, I'm a huge champion of what they're doing over there. And then I left that company. I went to another company where I'm at now, Vestmark, and found a bunch of tech that's sort of scattered around between really everything you could think of besides Ruby, from Java to Go to Python to a couple of different flavors of Node.js, TypeScript, and .NET. And so this is incredibly difficult to wrap my head around and difficult for an engineer to work within. And I used a psychology. The team's going to hear about this now because they're going to listen to this. So now they're going to know what I did to them. But I said, hey, we need one stack. We need to pick one stack that's going to be the stack that we all use instead of this. I want you guys to get together, and this is talking about 8 people in a room trying to agree on something. Again, 8 engineers in a room. I sent them off to go come back and tell me, and I knew what was going to happen. I gave them a week, and a week later, I said, "Okay, which stack did we pick?" And of course, they had not agreed on anything, and they said, "Well, you're just going to have to pick." And I was like, "All right, guess what? It's Rails. Big surprise!" And so we picked it. Now, to the team's credit, no resistance at all. They were like, "Okay, great. If that's the decision, awesome. Let's do it." And they dove in, but they really didn't know anything about Rails at the time. So they were trying to figure out, like, how do I get up to speed on this, and how do I get started? And I knew that was a big problem. So how do you get people up to speed on Rails when you get started? What I did was I compiled the set of resources that I knew were available that were likely to be valuable right up front. And that was a bunch of blog posts and a handful of really good books and some video series, including the Go Rails series from.
Right. Yep. I was going to suggest that. Yes.
Yeah. Very, very good. But then the other thing that I did was I just started. So how do you start on the project when nobody knows Rails except for me? Well, I guess I'll just start. And so I started writing the code, and I started building out the first part of it. And I pulled in a very small group of engineers to be a part of this initial product we were going to build. And so I think it was me and 4 engineers. And we just got together, and every day we talked about it. We looked at the code. They got in and they started building their knowledge. And they just did the thing where they would say, okay, here's how I would do this in whatever language they were coming from. And like I said, there were so many. This is how I did that. How would I do that in Rails? And they would ask themselves that question, and ask the internet that question. And that very quickly got them the complete wrong direction on a bunch of things, because Rails, you could easily do something the way you did it in your old system in Rails. Ruby is phenomenal in that way, right? Like you could write Ruby just like like if you were a Java developer, and Ruby's going to say, "Oh, fine, yeah, if you want to use abstract layers of abstract patterns on top of each other, okay, no problem." It's not really right. So then we started to have regular discussions about the Ruby way. And what I did to facilitate that discussion internally was I created a Slack channel. This is actually the same thing I did at FlexCar. And it's called Ruby, 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 Ruby. And it has pinned at the top, or it did at the start, the Kaiser Chiefs song, which if you haven't heard that, the main chorus is Ruby, 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 Ruby. So, other than that, it doesn't really have much to do with anything, but it's fun. And then I made a public invite. I said, "Hey, this is what we're doing. If you're interested, come here and talk about it." And it became the source of where people would learn something and share it, and people would try something and say, "This didn't work out so well." And it really became like the cornerstone of how the company started to become Rubyists. And by the way, I loved watching this channel because you see the evolution. I didn't steer anybody towards Why the Lucky Stiff. People discovered it serendipitously and then shared it in that Slack channel. And then everyone was like, I can't believe this. And of course the question is there an up-to-date version that seems a little out of date? And I'm like, I really wish, but it was good. And so people were not just learning the tech, but they were getting this introduction to the culture of Ruby at the same time. And I wasn't, even though I forced Ruby and Rails on the team, the rest of it was exposure. And then they started to sort of self-indoctrinate. And now we've got a team of, our engineering team is still quite large, but we have, I'd say, at least 30 people who would consider themselves Rubyists now, who are fans of the language and quite adept at building and shipping things with Ruby. And it's so I think, I don't know if that answers your question at all, Errol. It's just sort of an explanation of our path here.
It does, because exposing people to Ruby and Rails is what actually works.
That's right.
Like, you can't do that with every language. Like, there's a lot of programming languages you would expose someone to and then go, well, I don't want to ever see that again.
Yeah. I think it'd be great for somebody more creative than me to put together like the stages of becoming a Rubyist that are in there, because there are these like milestones and moments that happen for I think almost everyone, like where they get to they'll get to a part in Rails where they find out they can type 5 days ago, right? Like if you remember the first time you saw that and your mind was completely blown by the possibility, and like, but I'm watching people experience that for the first time. It's like when you watch I'm a dad, and so like I remember watching like my kids take their first steps and be like, yes, I know what this leads to, and it's kind of like that, watching like my colleagues experience these same moments, and I think that's something that is really genuinely unique about Ruby that you can't easily get elsewhere.
Yeah, I would completely agree. One of the things that we used to do at Reinteractive is something called Install Fest, where we rent a room for a night or a day over the weekend or something like that, and get a bunch of people who are interested. They might be third-year computer science students, or they might be people who are coming from a different language and want to broaden their horizons. But, just anybody. Get them in the room. They've got their laptop. Get them up and running and deploying an application right then and there. They see how easy it is. They see what the possibilities might be, and they walk away with something having been done. We used to run this regularly over the years, and when I go to Ruby conferences in Australia, people will stand up and deliver sessions that got their start from those install fests. So I know it was incredibly successful, and they acknowledge that too, which I think is great. So I'm saying this because it's just an idea, and I've intended to get it up. I've intended to get it up and running again recently. Haven't, because of various business reasons, haven't got around to it, but needs to be done. But I think anyone can grab that idea and do that as well.
I think it's great. Boston definitely needs something like that. Like we have a great Ruby community here, but I think a lot of folks sort of scattered to the suburbs during the pandemic. But there's so many people who are tech adjacent or tech interested that, given an opportunity like that, could become future Rubyists. I would love to do something like that. Well, if you're thinking of doing something like that, Boston side, I'd love to be involved. Otherwise, maybe I'll just take your advice and figure out how I can just get it to happen.
Yeah, I should actually dig out the script and just make it available, because there is an exact script. Probably needs to be updated, but I'll make it available, and I think anybody could get on it. But the point is this: we have incredible developers in Ruby. Like, some of the problems that get solved on a routine basis, and I see them just at Reinteractive, like, the developers solving things. I go, that was pretty clever. Like, that was smart. Yeah. So we have some great guys, but they are also, they're a population that are, for want of a better word, aging, and we need to replace them at the front end with new people. Into the future, the number of applications that are required in the world to run the future that we're talking about is going to increase exponentially. AI is not going to solve all of that problem. It'll solve some of it, but we need more and more developers. So we need to talk about Ruby having its place in that future.
I think that's right. Well, I think there's been some writing that's been done, by the way, that, if you are building with AI, Ruby is an ideal choice. For a number of reasons. And I already felt that way, but I knew I had a lot of bias. So it was good to see it get put into, and I think if you're listening to this, just search, why Ruby is the best language for AI or something like that. You'll find the blog post, no trouble. But it was good to see some actual rational reasons besides it's because it's my favorite.
Because I like it.
But it's true. It is. I have found, as long as I've got a good Agents MD or Claude MD file in place, I am incredibly productive with a sidecar of AI with Ruby, and I think I could be with other languages as well. But what's really great about Ruby as the tool that you're using with AI is that when you stop using the AI and you have to go put your hands on the code, which is inevitable, right? It's not going to take you to the finish line. When you get there, you're using Ruby now. You're using a language. that is designed for you to understand. And since AI tends to write code that can be a bit confusing, especially because it can be very verbose, and you're trying to figure out what it does, I have found that if AI has generated JavaScript code or Python code or Java code, it can be very difficult for me to find my footing in the AI generated code base. When it's Ruby, I understand what it's doing because AI is generating idiomatic Ruby in most cases. I can find my footing and be like, okay, I see this. And then I can easily say like, that's completely unnecessary. Like, we'll clean this up. But I found myself much more productive in the post AI part of the project when I've used Ruby. So
right.
that's,
Yes, you
I
can
think that's a great
pull up the
reason.
file and just read it.
It just feels, even if you're not an experienced Rubyist, you understand what the code is doing. And I think that's what's a really nice thing about it. The other thing, Ruby's AI story, I've this was an internal challenge that we went through, which is, we would like to build and ship an AI product, which we recently have. We're very proud of it. And a big internal conversation was, well, if you're going to build an AI product, you have to use Python. That's the natural choice. Python has LangChain. Python has LangGraph. Python has all of these pre-built libraries and SDKs that make it so that you can do this. Nobody else has that. And I was skeptical at first when I was hearing those opinions, but I was like, okay, well, maybe that's true. And what we did was we did an internal training that I also took part in myself, where we all learned LangGraph and LangChain. Like we just learned fundamentally, what is it? How does it work? How do we use it? And after doing that training, I was like, okay, this is very cool. But ultimately, what am I getting from LangGraph? Well, I'm getting a library that lets me make HTTP calls to a large language model API server. Okay, that's not hard to do. I've got a big stack of opinionated abstractions about how an application like this should be constructed. And even in my training, I already had taken issue with some of the abstractions that were there. And that's maybe just the obstinate software engineer in me that can't agree that somebody else's abstractions are better than my own.
But, right.
But there's this big stack of abstractions that make some assumptions about how you're going to build your application. And then there's some orchestration, right? And okay, well, that's also not hard to do, right? Like a state machine is something that comes pretty naturally to any Rubyist. So if I think about these being the three main things that I get, and tool calling, which is just JSON parsing, I'm like, wow, this is a bunch of stuff that Ruby already does really, really, really well, packaged up with great branding. LangChain sounds really cool. LangGraph sounds even cooler, and it has Lang right in there, so you know you need it. But when we actually looked at what it was made of, it suddenly became very different, the conversation for us. And we said, well, if it's just these things, and these things are very simple to do in Ruby, why don't we just do this with Ruby? And has somebody else already had this idea? And it turns out, yes. There's a couple of people. So Carmine created Ruby LLM, definitely had the same sort of thought process at some point, because if you look at that project, it looks like he thought exactly what I thought and then did the thing where he made it real. And then you got people who are saying like, yeah, and also we can make it look like Rails. And so you got like Justin Bowen who did the active agents stuff. And it's like, now it just feels like a part of your stack without having to go do something else if you're already a Rails developer. So we did a small experiment and just said, hey, let's just see. Let's just do we did a 3-day experiment to say, how productive could we be building if we used the Ruby stack instead of the Python stack? And I'm telling you this right now, the 3 engineers that we went into that with were skeptical and very pro Python to start off with. And I love them. They are amazing engineers. And I told them to push that deep down inside and give this a try anyway. And it didn't even take the full 3 days for them to come back and be like, oh, this is so much better. Yeah. Like I can have my tool call right inside my application. I don't have to make like a network call where I'm smuggling a credential out to try to make sure that the large language model is only acting on behalf of this one user. Like I could skip all that. It was really, really nice to see them do this very small experiment and realize And that turned into, everything we needed to know. And now we've, been able to ship our first AI product. We'll be able to iterate on it very quickly thanks to that. And now we're working on, some new exciting upcoming AI product. By the way, the first AI product
That's
is
awesome.
Advisor Assistant, which is every company's first AI product is going to be some sort of chat bot with an agent attached to it, right? Like,
the inevitable.
It's got to be what it is. We are no exception to that rule. Ours is very useful. But now we're building some other things I can't wait to talk about in the future.
Reminds me, actually, I had a client recently who was a small business that delivers materials to trade. They're plumbers, so they deliver, they wholesale trade stuff. So it's a commerce website, and they have lots of plumbers that want to apply to use their site, but there's a whole application process, credit, all of that sort of stuff, and they were losing business because the application would hit their website, and then someone would have to read it, verify that it was accurate, and then contact the person. So it's like a 2 to 3 day delay. By the time that delay had kicked in, many of the plumbers had just gone off to the local hardware store and bought what they needed to, or gone to a different supplier, so they'd lost the business. So that they said, we need to improve this process. We came up with a whole plan, and they wanted to turn it into a chatbot. And I was like, that's not the right way to do it. A form is still the correct way to do it. So Kane, the COO at Reinteractive, started to build this. And it was an integration with Salesforce. So, he had some specialized knowledge there. He starts to build it. And, obviously we stayed away from the chatbot because it wasn't necessary in that case. And he starts to build out the form and realizes halfway through the project, probably even 3/4 through the project, that actually AI was just going to be completely useless. All he needed, there was a programmatic solution to it, basically, which I think is something we need to discover sometimes.
Yep. Yeah. I think sometimes AI is there because it's AI, and you get to say you did an AI thing. But I also think that's one of the interesting evolutions of AI too. So, I don't know if you ever used MongoDB much. I
did back in the day.
In the early popularity period of Mongo, I was like, oh, this is great. I don't have to think about schemas and whatever. And what I ended up learning in my time with Mongo, I think Mongo has a lot of great uses. I'm not trying to reduce its value for anyone who loves it. But for me, where it was most useful was it gave me a place to get to work and experiment in a schemaless world. And it was great. And then eventually I knew what the schema needed to be. And once I knew what the schema needed to be, it was much more efficient for me to just take the schema and create a Postgres database that matched that schema. So it was a good squishy place to figure things out, but then it was more efficient to move off of it.
I think I did exactly the same thing, Freedom. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of that natural thing. I think AI and AI agents have some of this too, where it's like, I don't really know how this is supposed to work or going to go work. So I'll use the AI agentic system to give me a flexible way to solve the problem. But then once you watch it for a while and you're like, oh, most of what this AI is being used for is this like 2 or 3 sets of tasks. Well, you could just go encode those tasks with like actual API calls that are far more efficient and don't require GPUs in order to do the thing.
Right. Right. Or the 90% accuracy as opposed to 100% accuracy.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think
but there are many great use cases.
Yeah.
There are great use cases, and we just have to be smart about what they are and apply them correctly. And finding those right use cases. And sometimes they're hybrid solutions. I've we talked about this machine not the cat, the panel that I've got over here, which is, that was just born out of trying to figure some things out. And one of the things that I discovered was the best solution to solving that problem was a hybrid approach. So I couldn't make the output exactly what I wanted using a prompt only, at least not using a local model, because that's what I wanted to do. So it's a small model, and the small models don't get things as accurate, and they definitely aren't as good at adhering to prompts. So I needed to include quite a lot of programmatic solutions, a little bit of, some regex and some other things to make it come out the way that I wanted. So I think that's the right approach. Yeah.
Yeah. I completely agree. Like there is the best solutions are probably going to look just like that with that mix. The other thing we found that the chat bot that we released, I should not call it that. I'm certain that our product and branding folks would not prefer the advisor AI assistant. I'm probably getting that wrong too.
Yeah.
Is our software has a ton of capability that is just not surfaced in the UI. Like it's just very difficult to feasibly come up with the right UI for all of the different things that are possible. And we're not really sure what people are going to want to use. So what we're finding with this is that stuff that we don't have a UI for, but the capability is there, making it available to the chat is suddenly giving life to some of those capabilities. And that is helping us to figure out some roadmap stuff, right? It's like, oh, well, everyone wants to do this thing, so we should probably build a UI to let them do it better because the chat interface for it kind of sucks. But that's the kind of stuff that we're also getting. It's almost an emergent thing where we get to work together with this thing.
Fred, we're almost out of time, and there are so many things I wanted to discuss with you, and we might have to do this again sometime. One last point I would like to get to before we do finish up, and that is you're going to be speaking at Dreamforce quite soon on the subject of Heroku. I am a big fan of Heroku. Tell me why do you like Heroku, or why are you involved there?
I'm a huge Heroku fan. I started using it years and years ago when, I think Ruby and Python were maybe the only things that were supported. And I loved it because as a software developer, I knew how to set up a server and FTP my files up and stuff like that. And I was totally confident in that. But I liked literally just having one command line from within the project that I could execute. And boom, my stuff was up and running. And it just felt not even like magic. It felt like true, like I was getting real efficiency in my feedback loop that I couldn't have gotten the other way. And plus you get a lot of other bolt-on things that you can get with plugins and stuff. So I just really fell in love with it then. Fast forward to more recently, here at Vestmark. So when I joined and we were talking about trying to get all of this tech that we had deployed, I wanted to make sure that our developers were moving not just to Ruby on Rails because I believe in the tech, but because it is a better developer experience. And if I wanted us to get to a better developer experience, I wanted it to be a top to bottom better developer experience. And so I said to our team here, I said, I literally said, I want our team to have a Heroku-like developer experience. Specifically use those words. And, folks looked at what was possible. When you ask for that, what do you get back? You get a bunch of Kubernetes plus Helm charts plus other scripts wrapping that stuff up. And I was like, boy, this does not feel Heroku-like. This does not feel like Heroku one-liners. And I just had the epiphany. It was like, oh, if I want my team to have a Heroku-like developer experience, we should just use Heroku. So we did. I didn't call anyone at Heroku and say, hey, I want to use Heroku. None of that happened. I literally took my company credit card. I went and opened up the Heroku account and said, here we go. And I just showed a couple of people here's Heroku. Here's how you can deploy stuff. And a team of engineers that had previously really been told hey, hands off, deployment is somebody else's job. Those engineers suddenly were in the driver's seat of getting stuff set up. And within the course of a day, had deployed software that would later become our first production deployment. And some great context setting for this, right? So we had our previous new product launch had taken 2.5 years to get V1 launched. Now, a lot of that is because they kept adding stuff in, and there was no easy path to production for anything. So there was no moment in time where it was oh, this could go to prod. Oh, this could go to prod. It was just a big ball of wax. So when we started this Rails project, I said, let's start by just building the next new product. We'll use Rails for that. And then I added on, and we'll use Heroku for that. And we'll have this great developer experience, and we'll learn together with this. So that new product went from first line of code, which I wrote myself as I could try to get people started on this thing, to being fully delivered and in the hands of a client using it, and became a daily part of that client's life in 43 days. And that's not 43 working days. Like, that includes weekends, which we took off. We didn't work on those weekends. So it was literally 43 days, less than a month and a half to deliver a production product. And we can attribute that 100% to the tech stack choice. And that is Heroku and Ruby on Rails made that possible for us. And the client in that case, by the way, like, was blown away. They did not expect to have what they were. We're not a bespoke software shop, but they needed us to advance that part of the roadmap for something they were doing. And so they were not expecting we would be able to get it done the way we did, as quickly as we did. And then the story didn't stop there, because then, like, every day we were pushing updates to production that were improving it. So, and again, Heroku just makes that so easy to do. So I'm a big fan. Yeah. So I'll be at Dreamforce. If anybody else who's listening is there, I would love to say hi and talk about Ruby.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're delivering a session talking about what we just spoke about, or some of that content?
I'll be exactly right. Yeah. We'll be talking about that path to shipping on Heroku as a financial services company, which I learned after doing it is unusual. So let's see if we can change that too. I think we need more Rails in fintech, and we need more Heroku in fintech.
Yeah, yeah, we've got a couple of clients that are fintech. Some are Heroku, some are AWS. But yes, I agree. Like, Heroku is definitely still the best solution to a lot of problems. It has a great future, and I like the team that are working in Heroku at the moment. Like, I really like those guys. There's some developers that have been there for a long, long time, and they are passionate. We should also remember that Heroku itself uses a lot of Ruby on Rails. We should remember that, as does Salesforce, by the way. Salesforce has a lot of Rails applications.
Salesforce, the owner of Heroku.
The current owner of Heroku. That's right. Yes. Yeah.
No, yes. That's right. And those folks are like, here's what I love about talking with people at Heroku is, like, when you're talking with another software engineer who's just really excited about what they're working on, like, you can tell. And I got to say, like, talking with folks at Heroku about what they're working on, about what they're able to talk about, you see that, like, enthusiasm and excitement for what they're doing. Yeah. And you just, like, it's hard not to want to be a part of it, to try to, like, I have not been able to use the new Heroku MCP, but I will have used it before I get to Dreamforce. I don't know if you've tried it out, Errol, but it looks pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think that's probably all we'll talk about today, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Before we finish, is there any question I should have asked you that I didn't, or anything you wanted to tell me about that I didn't give you the opportunity to say?
No, I don't think so. I just think we could have your cat could have played a larger role in the podcast. That would have been fine with me.
I think my cat would have liked to have played a larger role. Is he still there? Oh, yeah, he's still there. Beautiful. Thank you very much, Fredo. I appreciate you saying what you did say, and I think the audience the podcast listeners will get a lot out of that. If people want to have some input, you can direct that to the committee. I think contact@rubycentral.org is the contact point. And feel free to have your opinions, but also temper that with some understanding. Yeah. Is that the right way to say it? I don't know.
We don't want to restrict anyone's free speech, but we certainly are a bunch of humans,
definitely not.
With feelings. So that's all I would say. Please just keep that in mind. We're trying to do what we can here.
Thank you very much, Fredo.
Thanks, Earl.